Hello and welcome to the Celtic Way morning briefing live on Monday, December the 19th. There's no Tony Haggerty today because his house is full of workies and they've switched his electricity off. So joining me today is TCW News writer Aidan Macdonald. How's tricks, Aidan? You all good?
Yeah, I'm good, Tone. Sean, sorry. Shocking start.
Mere seconds in and you've already offended it. That's the thing. Now, conspiracy theorists among you might think Tony's just avoiding coming on here today because a certain Lionel Messi won the World Cup, and potentially thinking that Aidan, you were likely shaping up to wind Mr. Haggerty up about that, given his Diego Maradona arguments are getting thinner by the day. Do you reckon that's accurate, Aidan? Are you ready to wind him up?
I had a full script prepared, Sean, but unfortunately I can't use it. So mate, I'm sure there'll still be another opportunity I can bring it up to him.
Well, you were triggering him left, right, and centre in that group chat of ours yesterday. That goes without saying. I think he was a tad annoyed that his El Diego was a byproduct of him winning. It was El Diego getting some pelters. So, no Tony. As I say, we'll come to that final and how we finished our predictor as well in due course. But first of all, can I just remind you all that we're far more than a podcast. We're running a cracking Christmas subscription deal just now that is £1 for 2 months of full access to the website, or 25% off the yearly price. So that's your in-depth scouting reports, data-led features, opinion pieces from the likes of Tony, myself, Aidan, 𝘀𝗶𝘁𝗆, big interviews and a whole lot more besides. The link is in the description and I'll put it in the comments as well. And I get on that for a wee pre-Christmas cracker, Aidan, as Tony likes to say. So, Aidan, without further ado, we're not going to the World Cup final first. We'll go to the more important game, which is Aberdeen 0, Celtic 1. General thoughts on Celtic's performance, on the standout performers?
Firstly, I thought the overall performance was pretty good. I know probably you just see the result, you think, and you see the goal came quite late. It must have been quite a tight match, but I think anybody could see Celtic completely dominated. I'm sure we'll go on to maybe talk about other reasons outside of Celtic's performance for that, given Aberdeen's tactics, etc. But I thought overall the performance was quite good, Sean, particularly given that for the last 5 weeks, a lot of those players have only really had some minutes in the Sydney Super Cup, which itself was a few weeks ago now, and then they played a friendly against Rennes. Outside your World Cup participants, a lot of them haven't played that much football, so I thought they looked relatively sharp overall. It wasn't perfect, but they got the job done in the end, and I never felt like they were going to lose the game. Obviously, there might be a slight concern that maybe we weren't going to get a goal, but overall, I thought it was quite a strong enough performance given the circumstances. In terms of the best performance, I thought McGregor was excellent. Even if he hadn't scored his goal, I would have probably had him down as man of the match, to be honest. I thought the way he was distributing the ball from the back was superb. You've seen the passing numbers that he was putting up were exceptional. He was really controlled both defensively and going forward. So, yeah, he was a standout for me, Sean.
David Ferguson saying our stats were incredible on Saturday. You kind of referenced one of them there. Callum McGregor outpassed the whole Aberdeen team.
Yeah.
173, 136, so it's not particularly close either. He set a record for an individual this season in the Premiership in any game. And I kind of wrote this in a piece that I'll put the link to in the comments. I wrote something today, and it was just as delightful as it is to say that about McGregor on his first game back and that kind of passing stat. It's just as damning about the Don's performance to me. I thought, given that he had 3-4 weeks to prepare his team, knowing that he was going to be playing Celtic, and as I say, I worked up there for years, so I still keep an eye on the reports up there and stuff. There was talk of a game plan in the run up to it. Now, in the aftermath, Jim Goodwin still said, this is our game plan to contain them and hit them on the counter-attack. But I would take exception to the framing of what they were doing as counter-attacking football, because just lumping it and hoping that something happens isn't the same as playing counter-attacking football. I worked up there when Derek McInnes was the Aberdeen manager, and he was routinely lambasted for not giving Celtic more of a game, for performances that were a lot better than what Aberdeen put in under Jim Goodwin on Saturday. And as we talked about on Friday, we were getting into that game thinking, well, there's a chance they might actually have a go because their home record's really, really good. 9 out of 10 in all competitions before Celtic came on Saturday, 6 out of 7 in the league. But it just didn't turn out like that. It kind of went into a shell, Aidan.
Yeah, at Aberdeen, I don't think they'd even register a shot on target. I don't think they did.
The
Or they
two shots. One
two
was
shots.
the Leighton Clarkson free kick that
Right,
Duke,
okay.
Duke dived to get, and then 92nd minute was the next one. 𝘀𝗀𝗁, I think it was, just a kind of pot shot. So two
Okay.
shots the whole game to Celtic's 33. Now I know you say it's 1-0. It really, the XG, the race chart and stuff on the data match report that was up on the site yesterday kind of suggests it should have been a 2 or 3 goal margin of victory, really. And as Postecoglou was right when he said after the game that Celtic should have won by more. But aye, what were you going to say there about Aberdeen's kind of tactics?
I was just going to say that it's just must be soul destroying to watch that regularly. To be honest, I mean, I
I
know
don't
there's
think they watch it regularly. That's the thing. I don't think they
okay.
don't play like that. They don't usually play
Yeah, I
like that.
suppose.
That's why it's so disappointing to see it.
Well, maybe if I reframe it as kind of more regular against Celtic and Rangers, then even the way they set up. I know Jim Goodwin had talked about in the run up to the game that he was wanting to sort of try and recreate St Mirren's performance against Celtic. Obviously, that worked for St Mirren in that game. They got a 2-0 victory, but Aberdeen never really got into really the attacking positions to actually get those chances to score. And to be honest, I don't think there could have been any complaints if it did end 3-4, even 5-0. The only difference was that obviously it took Celtic getting a late goal. Maybe that sort of doesn't make his tactics look quite as bad, but it's just I can understand when Celtic are playing, like, no disrespect to teams like Livingston, etc., because obviously the budget, obviously there's still a big budget difference between Celtic and Aberdeen. I get that, but I can understand for teams near the bottom of the league why they would play like that, just given the way this sort of budgetary constraints, just with the players they've got at their disposal. But Aberdeen, for a team that's third in the league, that all right, they don't have anywhere near as much money as Celtic or Rangers, but still have a decent enough budget. Do you know what I mean? I don't understand why they would set up like that, to be honest. And I know you were saying Derek McInnes used to do something similar and get lambasted for it, but I don't know. I was surprised about how defensive Aberdeen were at home, to be honest, Sean.
It was what I would say is, and this is the kind of that's the kind of go-to thing from certainly from fans of other clubs when they're talking about Celtic, but is that the disparity in finances and stuff. But Celtic showed in the Champions League, even if Celtic still played their football in the Champions League, whether it worked or not is up for debate, because Celtic had the chances, didn't take them, but ultimately no, it didn't work because they never even got in the Europa League from it. But in terms of Aberdeen, as I say, they don't usually play like that. That was, and I don't want to use it all the time, but it was anti-football. There was no intention, no intention of winning that game. Not even really any intention of passing the ball, to be honest. So from what I understand, a lot of the fans are annoyed, and I think that's their right to be annoyed with that. Would they have been just as annoyed if they did get the point? Probably not, but at the same time, knowing what it's like up there, they're a proud fan base, they would have still been saying, well, that's not the way that we should be playing against Celtic, that kind of thing. From Celtic's point of view, and Beach Boys puts in a comment here saying, just point out basically that Jim Goodwin was only a couple of minutes away from getting a point. Did anybody moan when Celtic did that against Barcelona? I would go as far as to say Celtic didn't play exactly like that against Barcelona. There was more thought in it than just what Aberdeen done at the weekend. And then he rightly points out at the end that it's up to Celtic to break it down. Now they did break it down, so Aberdeen went and played that game and got nothing for it, except criticism from their own fans and everybody else. Really, Aidan, is what I would say.
Yeah, it was a kind of relief in the end that Celtic did manage to break it down, just given the circumstances. Obviously, with Rangers beating Hibs in that game coming a wee bit earlier, you wanted to make sure you still had the 9-point lead come the end of the weekend. But even like you say, even if Aberdeen had got the point, obviously their fans on paper would be delighted. But from what you were kind of saying from your experience up there, they still would have been quite critical of how their team played. But obviously they would have been like that. Well, we've got the point. But yeah, it was Celtic could have easily won that game if they'd been a bit more clinical. I'm sure we'll mention maybe individual chances, but I know there was at least a couple that have been a bit more clinical. It could have been 2 or 3-0 before McGregor even scored later on. So, but they got there in the end, which is all that matters. But
a couple of people are commenting here about individuals, Kyogo missing chances, that kind of thing. But I do want to go a positive. I thought 𝘀𝗁𝗁 had a really good game when he came on at half time, Aidan.
Yeah, Abada was really good, and I think sometimes he maybe has a sort of stigma around him of if he's not contributing a goal or maybe an assist. Sometimes he can be quite quiet in games, or I would never go far to say that means he never contributes anything when that's the case. But sometimes, he can be a wee bit quieter. But even though he didn't contribute a goal or assist in that Aberdeen game, he was really dangerous when he came on. He was taking on their fullback. He put at least 2 or 3 really good crosses in that were just waiting for somebody to get to them. Which if one of them goes in, then he's adding to his assist charts. But yeah, and he also had a couple of shots as well. I think that sort of one near the end, it was right at the sort of near post for the Aberdeen goalie. That sort of sprung Celtic into the action in the sort of dying period of the game, which I think it was a couple of minutes after they ended up getting their goal. So 𝘀𝗁𝘁 had a really, really positive contribution. It's definitely one of the sort of best performances I've seen from him that didn't include a goal, I would say, because he was really, really dangerous when he came on. You could see Aberdeen were struggling. So if he can keep putting in performances like that, if he's not going to, in games he's not going to score, then it's a real positive.
Max Stark coming in saying he thought 𝘀𝗁𝘁 was very good when he came on, and then pointing out that he thinks Aidan Macdonald struggles against teams that sit in like Aberdeen did. I think Tony gave him a 4 or a 5 Macdonald for his first half performance. I don't disagree. I think when it's to the extreme that the opponents like Aberdeen and Saturday sit in, I do wonder the wisdom of starting Aidan Macdonald from the start, obviously, because he's more of a... I mean, he always gives you the effort. He always gives you... He's always liable to win the ball back high up the park and stuff. But in terms of actually breaking a team that does that down, I think you're looking more like the 𝘁𝗀 type. Don't get me wrong, I didn't necessarily think 𝘀𝗁𝘁 was the man to come on and do it, and he did. I realise he never got the assist, but he very much should have got an assist for that 𝘁𝗀𝗁𝘁 chance, I think. So I see where Max is coming from in terms of Macdonald. I think 𝘁cie𝗱𝘆 picking up that knock perhaps maybe changed the team, because I think he might have started knowing that he's got a bit more guile than the likes of Macdonald and 𝘀𝗁𝘁, and that might have been different. Nonetheless, Macdonald started. He got the nod, as he often does, because he's one of the kind of main guys for 𝘁 𝘀𝗀𝗁 when it comes to team selection. But Tony's probably right. He didn't do enough, and I think Ange substituting him at half time probably reflected that, Aidan.
Yeah, he did struggle a bit, and I think maybe that was probably to do with Aberdeen's tactics as well, with him sitting in. Maybe he just couldn't have the influence in the game that he would have wanted. I think probably Tony's sort of rating on his performance was fair enough, I would say. We know how much of a quality player he can be. I mean, we've seen it in the World Cup plenty of times, but yeah, it just wasn't his day. And I think not having 𝘁𝗀𝘀𝗁𝘁, that was a bit of a blow, to be fair. I know obviously Celtic got the result, but I'd imagine, like you said, he'd have been a certain starter for Ange. So hopefully he's okay. If whether or not, we obviously don't know if he's going to be available. I don't think for the Livingston game, that's not been commented on yet, I don't think.
No, but he did kind of say that it was just a minor knock, so I wouldn't rule it out yet. It'll be asked tomorrow, I suppose, at the presser.
So if we could get 𝘁𝗁𝘁𝗁𝘁 back, even if it's just an option off the bench for these sort of next 2-3 games, I think that would be big. But yeah, with 𝘁𝗁𝘁𝗁𝘁 not being there, Macdonald maybe struggling about that, gave 𝘀𝗁𝘁 the opportunity to come on and have a real influence on the game. So yeah, it wasn't the best performance from Macdonald, but I'm sure he'll get out of his system, and it wouldn't surprise me if he maybe doesn't start the next game. But Ange does like him, so I think we'll still be getting plenty of minutes over this sort of festive run.
David Ferguson coming in saying he's went from happily waiting until the summer to bring one striker in to thinking that Celtic desperately need 2 in January. Do you agree with that, Aidan, or is that overkill a wee bit?
I would like them to try and bring one striker in, regardless of what happens with the obviously situations around the 𝘁𝗀𝗁𝘁. 2 strikers, I don't know if I could see that unless 𝘁𝗁𝗁𝗁𝗁 was to leave, to be honest. And I don't know if maybe 𝘁𝗀𝗁 was to get injured or something during the January sort of transfer window period. I don't think I could see them bringing in 2, but 1 at least, that I would say I would be quite happy with that, just as a sort of another option. But
Michael Ross saying got to be first team ready strikers though, no projects. Suppose that kind of chimes with 𝘁𝗀𝗁𝗁𝗁's. Well, I see people saying lack of game time. It's probably lack of starts rather than lack of game time, because there's not that much between the two of them. 𝘁𝗀𝗁's record and underlying stats are still better than 𝘁𝗂𝗁𝗁𝗁's. So I think, although people remember the fact that he misses a couple of sitters, I think 𝘁𝗀𝗁's still the first choice. But if you're struggling to get last season's joint top scorer in the team from the start, then realistically, if you're signing any strikers, they need to be better than both, or they're just going to be in the same predicament.
Yeah, it would have to be somebody who was going to come in, was either like a really, really, really top young prospect or somebody that was already in their peak that is going to come in and challenge. The way that sort of 𝘀𝗻𝗁 was able to just kind of slot in as soon as 𝘁𝗀𝗄 wasn't there. He was in, obviously at times he's played ahead of 𝘁𝗀𝗄, particularly near the end of last season. That would have to be somebody like that. I think that would be the sort of player the manager would go for. Obviously, no transfer is ever a guarantee. You can hope to bring in somebody who's going to be the main striker, maybe it doesn't work out, but I think if we were to bring in a striker, it would be someone that could challenge him. I don't think it would be, like quite a somebody who's going to potentially be like a second or third choice. I think it would be a player that's going to be able to come in and start games, because that's what you need if you're wanting somebody to challenge those two. There's no point bringing somebody in who isn't going to be an option for, like, if we even don't look too far ahead, but even Europe next season. Do you know what I mean? You need someone who's going to come in and be able to be effective doing that. So I think it would be a first choice, but we just need to wait and see.
Speaking of people that maybe need to start games, we're going to come on to Stephen Welsh, because there's more reports coming out that potentially there's clubs wanting him on loan, Aidan. But first of all, I'm just going to flick this up from Peter Morrison, just noting that James Forrest get his 100th assist for Celtic at the weekend when he flicked the ball back to Callum McGregor for the goal. Joins Henrik Larsson and Jimmy Johnston, I think, statistically, as the only players to have 100 goals and 100 assists.
Not bad company.
Not bad, aye, not bad. Do you think, is this coming to like bearing fruit now, where Forrest, when he's not injured, when he's not needed to play 2-3 times a week, this is the kind of contribution he can make? It might not be that he starts all the time, might not even be that he scores that hat-trick like he did against Hibs all the time, but smaller contributions, maybe off the bench or maybe in cup games, is kind of why he agreed to a new 2-year deal.
Yeah, I would say so. I think given James Forrest's age, even though he's maybe not the oldest player in the world, the injuries that he's had probably add another sort of couple of years, etc., onto sort of the wear and tear of his body, etc. I think this is probably yesterday was the best sort of example of what James Forrest can produce. Because even near the end, they had that loan. I think he beat 2 or 3 players and he took the ball. It looked like he was going to take the ball at the corner. I think he ended up winning a corner from it. That just sort of killed a bit of time at the end, even though Celtic went under too much pressure from Aberdeen. But things like that, I thought that's exactly what personally I would like to see from James Forrest. Now, and don't get me wrong, he can start from the games and still contribute. We've seen his hat-trick against Hibs, etc. But overall, if the majority of his sort of cameos or sort of appearances this season where all the other wingers are fit, I know 𝘀𝗻𝗁 wasn't available yesterday, if he's coming on, getting an assist like that and bringing a sort of controlled nature to the game late on when it's to win a match or just see it out, I think that's perfect. Obviously, the comments mentioned there, that run down the wing from Forrest. But yeah, for me, Sean, I thought that was exactly what I see James Forrest doing, to be honest.
It was also, as Gary McDowell points out, I will get Stephen Welsh, by the way, I've not forgotten, 200 goals under Ange Postecoglou, 200 competitive goals. If you keep your eyes, if you subscribe to the newsletter later on, I'm breaking it down. I'm breaking all 200 goals down. And it can, well, you'll see when if you subscribe to it. It'll go on the website tomorrow, but if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll get it tonight. 200 goals, Aidan. Ange Postecoglou was asked after it, what does that say about your team, that you've scored 200 goals since you come in, and 100 are at home and 100 are away? And then, kind of typical Ange Postecoglou fashion, he just says, yeah, we score goals.
No, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that wee interview clip, to be fair. Yeah, the stats are excellent under Ange, and it's no surprise that they're reaching those numbers when you look at some of the scores across. If you look at some of the scores across his 2 seasons, really, I mean, 9-0 Dundee United comes to mind, 4-0 against Rangers, 6-1 against Hibs. That's just the decent games, but probably ones that are slipping my mind. I think there was 6-0 at the end of the season against Motherwell as well, wasn't there? So there's been a lot of really, really strong performances, but yeah, the goals tally's been excellent. You can't fault it.
Patrick McLaughlin just coming back in with a wee query about the James Forrest stat. When did statistics for assists become a thing? Pretty sure there's old players not getting the proper credit. I tend to agree with you, Patrick, because I'm not entirely sure how they're counted for older players. Because I know when we done our kind of Lisbon Lions anniversary stuff back in May, Tony spoke to John Clark. I done a kind of accompanying piece just going through all the different rounds, and I tallied up the goals and assists just for that European Cup run, and that was basically me trawling through match reports from the time and seeing who, presuming that they were correct as well, of course, seeing who supplied the ball for the goals, that kind of thing. So it is quite difficult for players from yesteryear, but evidently someone must have tallied up Jimmy Johnston's assists because he played in that era and he's been credited with a lot more than 100 assists. So I do take your point, and it also reminds me of a thing. I think Alison mentioned it on here when she was on before, but when she was working for Celtic, Lubo Moravcik asked for her help to tally up his assists because it wasn't something that was tracked as often back then. Even in the early 2000s, it wasn't something that was really tracked, and she had to do the same thing. Had to go back through all the Celtic views, all the match reports, and try and come to a number of how many assists he had for Celtic and stuff. Which is pretty interesting. That's the kind of thing I do like doing, but having to do it by hand through different Celtic views and stuff must have been some chore. But I do take your point, Patrick. Anything else to add about the Forrest or the goals, Aidan, before we move on to Stephen Welsh?
Just I thought McGregor's finish was absolutely superb. And I know, and prior to that in the match, quite a few players had sort of maybe poor attempts is a bit harsh, but attempts either weren't beating the first man or the keeper was just sort of easily collecting them. So it was really good to see a sort of high quality strike like that under a lot of pressure. And it just shows you what McGregor can even bring from a forward perspective.
You see the pass network for that game on Saturday. As much as we're saying he was playing deep and he was playing the six, he was playing in their half. It was, I think, one of those games where it's only one of the centre backs that's really on average in their own half, and then the keeper. But yeah, moving on to Stephen Welsh. As I said, we were talking about players that maybe need to start. There's been reports emerging. I think the Daily Record, Scott Burns at the Record, has said that I think 𝘁cie𝗱𝘆 are the latest to express an interest, which is an interesting one. Aidan, is it sensible for him to go on loan now, or would you rather see maybe how it goes in the summer?
I think obviously, I know 𝘀𝗶𝘁𝗍 can't play until January, but I think with him coming in, there's now feasibly potentially 4 players in front of Stephen Welsh. Obviously, Maurice Jens is only on loan. We don't know if he's going to be signed up or not, so he could potentially leave in the summer. Then there's only 3 ahead, which is still quite a lot, to be fair. But I could maybe see him moving on either in January or the summer, or whether it's a loan or a permanent deal. If it's Porto as well, obviously that's quite it's a big club, etc., isn't it? So if they're coming in and they've been able to promise him a really good pathway to the first team or potentially regular first team football, we don't know what the sort of discussions are if there are any going on. I think it's probably is quite a difficult one. I do like Stephen Welsh, but I just think that even if we just take the centre half situation right now, obviously this sort of maybe next few games is a bit of an exception because 𝘀𝗶𝘁𝗍 can't play. But if we take it after that, potentially 4 players in front of you is quite a lot. I know players can get injured, but like you seen with 𝘁𝗍𝘁𝗍 and Starfelt were both injured at one point this season, so it can happen. But I think I can maybe see him moving on, Sean, to be honest.
On loan or permanent?
Maybe loan to start off with, yeah. I suppose maybe loan. But I think longer term, I think he could move on permanently, to be honest.
Well, his contract's till 2025, so there's some leeway there if they want to just send him on loan and see how it does. Even if it ends up, it's just to try and get a kind of price for him rather than coming back and playing. He's also homegrown, you've got to remember that. Edward Diver saying, love Big Welsh, he would run through a brick wall. Good luck to him. David Gillespie saying it would be good for Welsh to go out on loan and play regular football. He reckons that he's got to focus on physicality and decision making. But there's a player in there. I tend to agree with David. I think there is a player in there. As with any, and I'm saying this as I'm saying young player, and I know he's 22, so it's not quite the same as the likes of Rocco Vata, but it's the same rationale. You need to look at the depth in front of you. Is there a prospect of him genuinely getting a run in the team like he got at the start of last season? I would say probably not. Carter Vickers is immovable. He's just not, unless he's injured, he is playing. Then you've got, as you mentioned, you've got a new defender in 𝘁𝗀𝗍𝘁𝗍 who is naturally left-footed, which might play into the thinking because Carter Vickers is the right centre-back, so anybody that partners him is going to need to play left centre-back, which Welsh has adapted to not bad, considering he was only really right centre-back and right-back before. He was never really a left centre-back. Carl Starfelt has adapted all right there as well. Now you've got the kind of issue of Maurice Jens as well, Aidan, who's only about a year and a half, I think, older than Stephen Welsh, but he's on loan. Now, do you put it this way? Does signing 𝘁𝗀𝘁𝗲 make it less likely that they're going to sign 𝘁cije 𝗀𝗋?
It's probably a difficult one. I think, yeah, it probably does. It probably does, to be fair. If Ange sees Welsh as somebody who's still going to, but he wants in the team, or not in the team, maybe starting regular, but somebody who he wants an option off the bench and an important player for the squad. Whether that's to do with the homegrown thing or not, or genuinely because he rates him as a player, which I think he does to an extent, because he does always talk him up, etc. If that is the case, then yeah, I would say it makes it unlikely that Jens would be signed in the summer. If Ange longer term is looking at 𝘁𝗱𝘆, is looking at 𝘁𝗱𝘃, 𝘁𝗱𝘆, and then 𝘁𝗀𝗁𝘁 with Welsh as a sort of two behind it, it probably makes it unlikely then that Jens would sign. If Welsh is potentially moving on, whether that be January or the summer, then obviously you would need to look. Maybe it would be Jens would be somebody that they would consider buying. Obviously, we've discussed about Jens' performances and that. Been maybe a wee bit up and down. At times he's been positive, and then he's maybe he's probably played a bit more football than a lot of people would have been expecting as well, given that at one point 𝘁𝗱𝘆 and 𝘁𝗱𝘃 were both injured, as we just touched on. But yeah, it probably does make it a wee bit more unlikely that he'll sign.
Max Stark saying he would rather buy Jens and sell Welsh, and then pointing out that there's not that much between them in terms of age. I mean, I don't know where I really sit on it, because I think 𝘁𝗀 is doing well enough for a lone player that you would consider you'd consider making it permanent. But then the fact that 𝘁cie 𝗀𝗋𝘁𝗲's been signed, unless someone else leaves, can you justify signing another centre back that you know would probably need to be played? Especially when the other centre back you're talking about is a homegrown player that meets that quota as well. So I think it's an interesting one. I have put a link, or I am putting a link to Stuart Ross did a deep dive during the break, kind of preempting that maybe Stephen Welsh would be talked about for a loan move when 𝘁𝗀𝘁𝗲 signed, and he's kind of dug into the data and tried to identify not just where he could go, but places that would actually develop him as a player as well. So they might mirror in certain ways the way Celtic play, or the league style might help him develop facets of his game that he needs to develop. I think off the top of my head, there was one in Italy, one in Belgium, and I think there was one in Portugal, but it wasn't Porto. I don't think he suggested Porto. In fact, I think he suggested Vitória, where Mikey Johnston is. I think he was hoping for a link up with him. But moving on from that, I suppose it's time to mention Mr. Messi, is it? We'll put up the predictions. Look away now, Mr. Tony Haggerty. There's one missing from this, actually. From Aidan, sorry, I've done the same thing. I never put the Golden Glove tips in this, but I did actually call it. You can look it up on the website. I'm not making it up. I tipped Emiliano Martinez of Argentina to get it. He did get it. I've ended up actually, Tony. Sorry, Aidan. I've ended up with Argentina, Messi, and the Golden Glove. But you did, must be said, hats off to you. You have dominated this predictor from the get-go, because you got Argentina, Messi for the Golden Ball, Mbappe for the Golden Boot, Juranovic to go furthest as well. Congratulations. There wasn't a prize apart from a hat tip, but you've got the hat tip.
Cheers. I should probably mention I had Lloris for Golden Gloves. To be honest, I didn't actually check into how far he was near that, but I know France did concede a decent amount of goals, so I don't know if he was in the top 3 or 4 of that. But yeah, no, overall, I was relatively happy with those predictions. Obviously, we've kind of discussed it quite a bit at this point, but I think me and you both wanted to see Argentina win it, obviously, given by the predictions, but just personally as well for Messi, and he was excellent last night, wasn't he, Sean? He was superb. Or yesterday.
It was. I just kind of wanted to see Tony spontaneously combust when the only argument against him was fulfilled. But it was overall, despite the fact I wasn't particularly up for the World Cup.
Yeah,
when it started, I did end up enjoying what I watched of it. I obviously enjoyed the final result as well. And yeah, but what I would ask is, I don't know if you saw Roy Keane talking yesterday, but despite the fact it ended up a very dramatic, memorable final, arguably the ideal scenario, certainly for people of our persuasion that like Messi, with him winning it. But Roy Keane was saying it was still stained. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, no, I do agree with that, to be honest, because nobody.
David Gillespie, Tony has had an absolute shocker. He did. I don't want to kick the guy when he's not here, but
I know
he'll be watching and he'll be shaking his head.
His Belgium shout was unfortunate, but I do agree. I do agree with what Roy Keane was saying there. That is staying to an extent for the reasons that we've discussed it at length. It's been discussed at length on various sort of channels, etc. I think we mentioned it briefly, and there was one of the articles that I did on, one of us did on the World Cup, talking about the Celtic players. I think we'd mentioned it as well during that. So yeah, it is always going to be sort of tainted to an extent because of that reason, because of what goes on in Qatar. Roy Keane was bang on there, to be honest. And I've been a bit hypocritical probably when I say that, because I've talked about how I have enjoyed watching the World Cup more than I thought I was going to do. But you can't deny that it is tainted to an extent.
I think the way that Keane put it is probably the best way I could put it as well, when he was saying that there was never going to be any doubt with the quality of players on show, that the World Cup football part of it was always going to be enjoyable. But as he said, off the part and the fact that it was in Qatar, and I realise he's saying that from Qatar, but so there's always that aspect to it. But I do agree with him in general. I think there's always going to be that kind of stain on it. And Max Stark putting up a comment here that he was not a fan of the robe that Messi was forced to wear. I think even the most understanding of people would see that for what it was, which was FIFA and Qatar making it about FIFA and Qatar rather than the winners, just to make sure people remember that this World Cup was in Qatar, Aidan, I think. So yeah, enjoyed it for the football. Agree with Roy Keane in general. And well done on your predictions, because that was I don't know if you're a gambling man, but I'll put them back up again. But that would be some bet there if you paired them: Argentina, Mbappe, Messi, and 𝘁anović. I don't actually know if you can bet on furthest of a team to go far, but I'm sure you could go it somewhere.
I had Mbappe for top goal scorer. That was my only one that actually came in from the start. So, but I didn't have any more bets. I should have put 4 of those on, but unfortunately I didn't.
Patrick McLaughlin saying he had much the same as you, apart from he had Morocco as the dark horses. That was what a shout then. What a shout, well done.
Very good.
They're very much the dark horses of all dark horses, I would say, because they finished 4th. It was superb. Speaking of the World Cup, before we wrap it up, there's a wee article, I shoved it up earlier on. It's video of 𝘁cie𝗱𝘆 and the Croatia team back in Zagreb, where over 80,000 people were waiting for them. Aidan, they had a concert, they had open-top buses, Modric addressed the crowd and different things. It looked like brilliant scenes, and 𝘁anović looked as if he was enjoying it despite his calf injury.
Yeah, that was that was good to see. It just shows you how, even though obviously they didn't win the World Cup, Croatia, that meant so much to the fans. And I mean, I think we have mentioned this before, but their record since first time they qualified for the World Cup was 1998, and their record since then has been superb. I think it's 2 third-place finishes and the final, obviously, last time out in 2018. So, yeah, fair play to Croatia and fair play to 𝘁anović. He was excellent during the World Cup. And well done to him getting that 3rd-place medal, obviously.
Yes, Croatia just in general, since they became an independent nation, have been superb at international tournaments. In general, their sporting prowess in general for such a small country is astounding, really. And we obviously extend our congratulations to 𝘁anović. I'm sure you extend it further than me, because you got you another one on your predictor there, Aidan. But I think we'll call it there for the day. That's 35 minutes nearly, and that's without Tony as well. So I think we've done all right there. Good stuff all round. Thanks, Aidan, for your contribution, and thanks as always, guys, for your comments and your questions and all the wee debates that you put in. Very much appreciated. Remember, as I said at the start, we're running a £1 for 2 month deal at the moment. Christmas deal, Christmas cracker, or as Tony said in the wee video that we put on Twitter, pull your own Christmas cracker. The link is in the comments, it's in the description as well. And apart from that, thank you again, and we'll all catch up with you tomorrow. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.